Recording. All right, let's do this before I lose my voice or some technical glitch pops up. Full house tonight, folks, on Mention and Dispatches. Mike is here. Mike, welcome back. Glad to have you.
Thank you. I think this is my first appearance on season 10, right?
I think this is your first shot at season 10.
Well, what's wrong? Something
I
must
don't
be
know,
wrong.
man. For being the Ed McMahon of the podcast, you're kind of slacking on this.
So this is kind of like when Ed was in rehab or something. That's what it is. Okay.
Sure, yeah, let's go with that. Also, for the first shot at season 10, the former co-host at a previous podcast, Michael, is back. We got Mike and we got Michael. Michael, how you doing, man?
I'm okay. I'm pretty good.
Yeah. Glad to have you. Even though it's like dinner time for you, thanks to time zone shifts and all.
Yep.
but yeah, we appreciate you joining us while the sun is still up.
Yep, glad to be here.
And the first time for any season with us here on Mention and Dispatches. Scheduling didn't quite work out last season, but we got him this time around. Our buddy Wayne is here. Wayne, how are you tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. Glad to be here. We've talked for months, I think, about getting me on Mention Dispatches. So I'm excited to be here, and I can only assume the check will clear shortly.
Whoa, what?
That's a big assumption.
Oh, I wasn't supposed to mention that on the air. My apologies.
Not a problem.
Glad to be here.
Hey, so everybody knows where, Mike runs My Own Worst Enemy. Michael does some stuff with Solosaurus. They both do a bunch of stuff with us here at the Dragoons. Wayne, talk to us a little bit about your channel and the things you approach and do on your channel. And we'll use that a bit as the lead in for the audience on the rest of our topic for tonight.
Yeah, so my name is Wayne Hansen, and I run the aptly named Wayne Hansen YouTube channel. So you can see how big my ego is that I just named the channel after myself. But I don't have the fancy cool name, but I've really just I love solitaire wargaming. That's what I do, and that is 99% of what I do when it comes to wargaming. And when I started my channel, there was some out there. Shout out to Single-Handed Warfare, Derek. He was putting out videos at that time. Really got me hooked on it. And I was like, you know what? I want to see more videos, and maybe I can do this. And when looking back, my first videos are pretty rough. I'm sure my new ones are fairly rough to some standards, but I love doing it. Channel's been growing by leaps and bounds. And, what I love to do, what I love to focus on is solitaire designed war games, right? So I play 2-player war games, play both sides, that type of thing. Absolutely do. Some of my favorite games are Great Battles of History, Ancients, love that. But when it comes down to it, and what I really focus on with my channel, the content that I create, is games that are designed for the solitaire player. They have a dedicated solitaire system, whether it's a smaller system, it's kind of an add-on, or the whole game is actually solitaire.
So that's a great lead into what we're doing tonight, which is we're getting back to talking some solitaire wargaming, as you'd expect from having Wayne plus the dude from Solosaurus plus the dude from My Own Worst Enemy all on one podcast. But Wayne brings up a good point, and that is the idea of sort of purpose-designed solo war games. And I know that this is something that has come up in discussion actually a little bit with relation to some of the awards categories. When you're looking at like best solo war game, are you talking about the best war game that can be played solo? Because Mike will tell you any war game can be played solo. Or are you talking about the best war game with a solo adaptation, like an intentional solo mode? Or are you talking about something that was purpose designed as a solo game? And so games like States of Siege are purpose designed as solo games, even though there's sort of a 2-player hack to some of them. I think most of David Thompson's Valiant Defense series are purpose designed as solo games. So, Mike, I know you're big on sort of playing multi-handed, multiplayer games, but you've done some of those purpose designed solo games. What do you see as some of the distinctions and how we should, if at all, draw some lines between these things?
So now, are you asking in reference to awards specifically?
No,
I think we
just generally, but if you feel like, poking the bear a little bit and making fun of the awards, I'm not going to stop you.
So I think, we'll set the awards aside for a second. That's a different issue. So for solo gaming, there are basically, there are games designed specifically to be played one person only, solitaire only. They have a set of rules. They have the AI. A lot of them are States of Siege type games, and you sit down by yourself and play. And there's some great games out there, and I've had a lot of fun playing those games.
Fantastic games, many fantastic games.
Many, and then there's then you have just regular games that were meant for 2 or more players, and of course, you can what they call 2-hand those. They like to say 2-hand, but Brant, you can tell everybody that for me that can be up to 7 or 8 hands when I for some of the games that I play. And then there's games that are intended for 2 players, but and I kind of hate to see it when a game does this, but they'll add a solitaire component to it. They'll say it has solitaire play, but it'll only be like a scenario that you play with very specific setup and rules, and you kind of walk through a specific scenario for what they call solitaire play. In my mind, that's not really a solo game. That's not a solitaire game. It's kind of like including a mod in the computer gaming world, digital world. You'd call it a workshop mod. And it's kind of what I feel like that is. If I'm not getting the entire game and you're giving me a scenario, and I'm trying to think of a game that I played recently that does this. And I think we've talked about it before on the last season podcast.
Just with you multi-handing it, I'm waiting for the My Own Worst Enemy playthrough of Here I Stand.
So it's interesting you say that, because this is 2023, and actually this was the year I was supposed to launch My Own Worst Enemy, but then the pandemic hit, right? So I had some free time on my hands. So I actually started it, back in 2019, 2020. One of the things I want to do this year is actually just that. I want to start showing people how they can play something like, what's a good example? War and Peace or something like that, where there's several players, and how to play all the sides yourself. It's doable. And, we talked about before we started recording this podcast of how we can go down different rabbit holes talking solitaire gaming. I'm talking about a very specific style of solitaire gaming when I say that. And it's more narrative and storytelling than competitive or historical curiosity, right?
So, Mike, I have the perfect example, I think. You tell me if it is, of a game that said that it came with a solitaire mode, and that it was kind of advertised as part of it, and that's one of the reasons that one of my big negatives why I had eviscerated it in my review, and that is not to bury the lead, but Absolute War from Carl Pratis. It said it's first of all, it's great for new wargamers. Not true. And secondly, it has a solitaire mode. No, it has like a page that's basically a couple paragraphs that says, hey, you can play it solitaire. If you're the Soviet Union, this is what you should focus on. If you're the Germans or the Axis, this is what you should focus on. Okay. Well, that's not a solitaire mode. That's just, that's the most barest of guidance. So that is one Absolute War from Carl Pratis that I felt was a huge letdown, in that they advertise it. GMT, I think, is a little bit of a disservice to the game to advertise it as a solitaire friendly game. It was not.
So that's the worst case of what I'm talking about. And I agree with you 100%. And there's a game, I won't name the game, but it's the same way where they say, oh, you can play this solitaire. You turn to the solitaire section. It's a paragraph. And here's what it says. If you're playing as the Germans, play the best you can. And do what you think the Russians would do. Know? And if you're playing the Russians, do the best you can and do what you think the Germans would do. And that's it. It's like, that's not a solitaire game.
No. I need somewhat of a system. And I'm playing and doing videos on filming for a game right now that is kind of straddles the line a little bit, but it cuts out a lot from the 2-player. But it does have a true solitaire mode. It may be lightweight compared to, and the full game is lightweight anyway, so it's extra light on the solitaire mode, but it has one. You can play it through. It has solitaire rules, and it's the latest release from Worthington, Archie's War, the Battle for Guadalcanal. So 2-player and solitaire. The board's 2-sided. Double-sided, you just flip it over, whichever you're playing. But it does have a solitaire mode, and I'm enjoying that. So that's what I look for when I talk about solitaire games. And that's why when I look back and I'm kind of looking at some of my my content, my videos, what I focused on. For example, when I say, hey, my top 3 solitaire war games for new war gamers, one of my most popular videos, the 3 are Hornet Leader, In Magnificent Style, and Stilicho, Last of the Romans. Those are 3 solitaire dedicated, solitaire design games, right? Even though I love, I mentioned earlier, great battles of history. I love playing some 2-player games, playing two-handed, whatever you want to call it. If I'm focusing on solitaire games, and that's what I want to talk about, and it is the majority of what I play, I want solitaire designed specifically.
So speaking of that, Michael, you've helped run a channel that talked about solitaire games. Now, those weren't all war games, but you've done a bunch of solitaire coverage over the years as well. You've done some of those States of Siege games. You've done some that also have solitaire modes built into a multiplayer game. What are your thoughts kind of on where we've gone so far?
Oh, I'm mirroring most of what you guys are saying here. I mean, when I started gaming, it was late 70s, early 80s, really in earnest. And back then there were very few purpose-built solo games. war games especially. I think Ambush was probably the first real solo war game that I ever played. And it was just, you play solo just because you just don't have anybody else to play with. I mean, we're talking the 80s here. There's no internet. There's, no instant friends that are interested in playing these kind of things. I mean, you just did what you had to do to entertain yourself, and that was kind of part of the thing. And when it comes to Solo Source, we haven't done a lot of recordings lately just because Martin and I have both had, things going on, but I brought the wargaming perspective to the table, and he brings more of the Eurogame type, normal quote unquote solo gaming experience to the table as well. And one of the things we've harped on in many episodes is this whole concept of, is this a solo purposed game, or is it one that's just kind of tacked on, where the solo mode is tacked on? Like you guys said, one paragraph in the back of the book does not a solo mode make. And more often than not, we've had this happen. Or having to buy something extra like a deck for an AI to simulate another opponent or something like that. That's kind of turns me off too. I want something built in the box where I don't have to invest extra dollars in the game. It's all over the place because one thing I've wanted to do with Martin was a episode that would cover tiers of solo gaming, and you guys kind of talked about this already, where you've got the purpose-built solo game, and that's it. It's a solo game, period. There's no two-player add-on to it at all. And then you go from there to, all the way at the bottom of the list, you're talking like social deduction games like The Resistance or One Night Werewolf or something like that, where you have, you need multiple players, or Battlestar Galactica even, where you have a hidden role kind of a component where it's nearly impossible to play solo and enjoy it in that regard. There's all kinds of different perspectives. And the thing about wargaming is it's part of the entire gaming market. There's so many good solo games out there that are not war games that we've talked about over the years, and some that we love, some that we hate. And I honestly, I used to be a complete war gamer and didn't really care for other board games that much, but Martin helped kind of turn me in that direction. So, I'm looking at piles of them around me right now, literally. Not all of them were war games. I'd say about half and half right now.
Michael, that first off, the Battlestar Galactica, that was such a fantastic game.
Oh, yeah.
It sometimes could run long, but here's the truth. Our group, we played it. I mean, you're talking 3.5 hours easy.
Oh,
I remember one time we played it, and then we set it back up. We played it again, back to back. I mean, it's that good of a game. So that's a fantastic game. So they're in all war games. Although my channel, I've had people ask this, I only cover war games specifically. I play other games, but I only want to cover on my channel because it's just me. I don't want to kind of dilute it. But the second thing is mentioning, you said all over the place, sort of describing these games. I think, and by the way, I don't know if I can offer a solution. I'm just going to complain instead. I think that you have designers, they are the ones who are kind of coming out and saying, and maybe some developers, some publishers help out, but designers come out and say, hey, this is my game X, whatever, it is this solo friendly or it's not solo friendly. Well, knowing that they want to have the most, I don't want to say sales in a negative way, they want the game to be played by many people, right? They want a game to be successful, so they're going to say, oh, you can solo it, but then you start losing a little bit. Okay, you can solo it, but what does that mean? I mean, I've seen games with hidden information that the designer said you can solo it. I mean, you just have to show things, you have to protect, you have to forget things, this and that. Okay, if your game has hidden information, you are now you talk about that rung of the tiered list, right, of solo. As soon as you have hidden information, you're getting down towards that social deduction games, in my opinion. You are getting, unless you have a solo mechanic that manages it, you are getting far away from being able to two-hand it. And I think it just comes down to, we don't have any consistency with how games are ranked for their solitaire. It just comes down to, what does the designer say, and then what does that particular publisher say? Right.
Yeah. And this occurred to me while you're talking there, Wayne. Brant, I know you've designed games, but Mike or Wayne, have you guys designed a game yourselves?
I've nothing to completion.
Okay.
So Mike, and I'm going to say what Wayne said, actually. So for years, I've never actually sat down to say I'm going to design a game, but I'm keeping files and notes. As I play games, there are certain elements of games I'll play and I'll think, you know what, this is a really neat mechanic. What if I did this and changed it this way? And I'm making notes as I go along. And at some point, maybe I've got some extra time now that I'm retired, and maybe I will attempt to put something together.
I've been asked by designers, and some designers I respect. I've been asked by a publisher too. After some of the reviews I've done where I've taken it to people. I don't want to get the same treatment in return, so maybe I won't design anything.
Makes sense. I mean,
ideally, you get that treatment from the developers and playtesters before it ever gets to public.
Brant, that is a great, wonderful point. And I don't know what world you live in, but I wish I was there too, because that would be.
I live in the world of a guy who self-published everything and got his ass kicked by reviewers, and deservedly so for a couple of really dumb ideas.
Yep.
So.
That scares me to death, because I as I've said on the AD site, I've actually started designing a game for DVG. So I haven't had much of a chance to work on it in the last few months because of family issues going on, but I intend to get back to it here within the next month or so. And the perspective that I have there is, I know I'm not going to get rich doing it. I know what my contract tells me I'm going to get, but I just want people to be happy with it. And I don't want it to be something that I don't want to misrepresent the game. I don't want it to be anything that it's not supposed to be. I just want it to succeed at what I set out to do. And to that end, I came up with, it's funny, where epiphanies come from when you're designing things or even writing, or doing some kind of review. Or an AAR, for instance. I came up with something that I was really excited about. And that was the piece that I was missing in the whole design process. It's like, what am I doing? I don't want this to be like every other leader game. I want this to be a little bit different. So I came up with a concept that Chuck Siegert, the guy who designed Stuka Leader, as well as a couple of others, he was like, that's a really good idea. I don't know if that's going to work, but I am intrigued. And I'm like, why didn't nobody think of this before? So just to tell you really quick, the game is B-52 Leader. And the idea was you could do missions, you can do campaigns like you can do in any other leader game. But in my idea, it was more of a campaign overall thing, to where you have a B-52 bomber from birth, quote unquote, to, whether you'll lose it in combat or it gets decommissioned down the line. And these things have been around for decades. So I thought it would be a cool idea to where you're actually playing the aircraft and not the crew for the aircraft. And you get it upgraded, which I know is not realistic technically, but we're talking, it's a board game. So I'm probably going to catch some flack for that. But still, I think, I was just really excited about this idea. So, moving forward with this, I'm like, hey, this is really cool. I'm going to do this. And, I think it's a great idea, but I'm afraid I got to steel myself, because there's going to be people who say, oh, that sucks. What are you doing? We don't like that at all.
There are B-52s out there at this point that I'm not sure have any original components from their airframe when they were built in the 50s.
Right. Yep.
As every new mod and upgrade has come along, they've slowly been replaced over time.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like Elvira, right? There's not a lot of original parts left on her.
Plastic surgery everywhere. Yep. That's the whole intent. You're going to level up your plane. You're going to move it through the models. You're going to get to upgrade it, things like that. And it's
so almost does this mean the EM50 leader game is not going to happen?
I wish, man. He was really positive about that when I posted that Photoshop picture. And I was like, well, could we do this? I don't think we can. I think it's more of a copyright issue with whoever owns the rights to that movie, but it's the Stripes. But yeah, that'd be great. To
get serious for a second, Michael, you mentioned you're talking about the game and having people, the designer, you do so many things, you're working on it, but what does that mean? And I mentioned this, I think pretty much every one of my reviews that I would classify as negative, right? As overall, I just didn't enjoy the game. Mm-hmm. And I always try to explain why in the different aspects. And almost all of them, I end up saying, this game could have used a developer. This game could have used someone besides the designer. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there were play testers, but I'm talking, more of a developer, someone more in charge, empowered to make hard decisions and tell the designer, no, or this needs a change, or are you sure about this? Why don't we try something else? And if that doesn't work, we can go back to this. Those ideas, just to push the designer, to get the designer to the point where, in the design, to push the design, put it through the ringer, so that when it's released, you can see that it takes a village, right? The cliche saying. Well, I think that probably is the case for a lot of war games as well, or should be the case.
Yeah, you're right. I am actually producing on another title, on a Compass Games title that will be called Red Banner Northern Fleet, and it's very similar to War in the Atlantic, War in the Pacific type of games. It's very simple, it's very basic, but yeah, I totally understand what you're coming from, because Sean Chick, the designer, gave me all of his design materials, and I, went through it with a fine tooth comb and started building on the playtest materials and all that stuff. So yeah, it's sometimes you got to speak up, but anyway.
My most famous or infamous review, I guess, is for Devil Boats from Compass Games. Charlie Award winner. I'm just saying. Also, the last year, I think they're giving an award for video reviews, so that says something. But so with that one, literally, my biggest complaint ultimately came down to, where was the developer? Where was someone that said, "What is this rule book?" Right? This rule book had the first sentence basically says, "Hey, start rolling on chart number 1, and that's how you learn the game." I disagree so much with that choice, and I feel like, I've seen with the sequel or the next kind of game with the similar system is they're doing away with that. It's going to have a proper rule book, a proper introduction. Which is another thing that gets me going with rule books and learning these games. But I could go on about that. It could be a whole other show. Yeah,
trust me. I'm a technical writer. I've been a technical writer for 20 plus years, and I've worked a lot in manuals for computer games and board games, and I know exactly what you're meaning. So a lot of these guys do not do manuals.
Wayne didn't know this, but
you know what's funny, Wayne, is I ordered that game you're talking about, Devil Boats, I think it was.
Yeah,
and it was when I was between a move. I was moving houses, and something happened, and it got shipped to the wrong house or somewhere. Something happened. I didn't get the package, and I was gonna go back and try to see if I could find it, but I actually watched your review on it, and I was like, I just truly don't want to hunt this down anymore. And I never got it. I never did get a copy.
So Wayne didn't know that this was coming, so it's not like he was offering up an infomercial on it. But we do have an episode coming up later this season on rule books and rule formats and different ways in which you can present the information needed to play the games. We're gonna have a whole episode on that coming up here in a few weeks.
I want to have more than one episode. That's good. That's like this topic. You're gonna have a lot of episodes.
You go on and on, but look forward to that.
Yeah, well, the whole thing is like we get a bunch of it done this season, and then we can circle back to it next season, and then it's fewer ideas that I have to conjure up as we go from year to year, right?
And both of our listeners will appreciate that.
I'm sure they will. Dude, we picked up at least a third having Cole Worley on the podcast, man. We got at least one extra one out of that.
Then our 3 listeners will appreciate that.
3? When did it go up to 3? Wow, that's pretty impressive. With regards to Devil Boats, Wayne, have you tried Schnell Boats?
So, no, I have not. I have and I don't want to get into the nitty gritty details, the drama. Let's avoid the drama. But for reasons of poor relation with the owner of Compass and such, I'm not providing them any sort of financial support anymore. So if they were to send me the copy to review, I would give it a fair review. And I'm being honest, I would not, I would give it a fair review. But I'm done purchasing Compass games. I'm with my own money or money, from the channel, things like that. So no, I haven't tried it yet.
Understood. All right, I got a copy of it sitting here. I actually agree with you when it comes to Devil Boats.
Wait a minute, Wayne. Did you make that decision? Have you ordered Carrier Battle Philippine Sea yet? Or have you?
No, I've not. Or I may have previously pre-ordered and I canceled my pre-order or something like that. So my last couple, I think Enemy Action Kharkov was my last Compass Games release that I got. It was a pre-order, and I straight just took it and sold it.
Yeah, so I'm just starting in that one, and I'm really liking what I see so far. It's solitaire only, and it's impressive.
Yeah, when you've been personally called out in a negative manner by and had your reputation attempted to be tarnished by the owner of a certain company, you're less likely, in my opinion anyway, I just have thin skin, but I'm less likely to give them that any more attention. And they get plenty. They're good without me. They don't need me, hawking their games at all. They're doing just fine.
Here comes the 10th season of the Armchair Dragoons podcast, mentioned in dispatches. Let's thank all of our Patreon supporters who pledged at the top level. A huge thank you to Stagger Wing, Patrick Garrity, Fred and his dog, Mike Quigley, Joseph Knorr, Hethwell Wargames, Robert, Patrick Mullen, Kevin Bertram, Chet Bell and Trab Corey for their support of the Armchair Dragoons and helping us to bring you the best strategy gaming content on the web. You too can sign up as a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/armchairdragoons.
I want to circle back to something that we talked about early on the outset of this, and that is the distinction between purpose-built solo games versus games that end up with a solo mode grafted on them. And it's something that we've noticed here on our episodes going through every fall when Compass sends out their big fold-out catalog. Like, we spend a whole episode going through the catalog and talking about the games, and there's always a bunch of stuff that's either solo designed or has a solo mode. Let's face it, they're going to be grafted onto it more than anything. And I think part of that is probably some marketing bias. Again, Wayne, you mentioned this earlier, trying to appeal to the widest possible audience.
Correct.
But looking at the games that are sort of purpose designed as solo games, I really feel like my experience is going to be, less than the three of y'all, but I've done a handful. I had the big article on the White Tribe that was on the site. I was very high on Empires in America back when Victory Point first published that one, 10, 12 years ago at this point. And they've had, other editions of it come out. It was one of the States of Siege games. They really, to me, sort of fall into two categories. And I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on these things. On one side, there's sort of the tower defense games, right? The States of Siege games, you're in the middle and you're just trying to keep everything at bay for as long as possible. And there are variations on the theme. Castle Panic in the Eurogame world is essentially a giant tower defense game. The other predominant one that I've seen, that I've had experience with, is more of that solo narrative game, something like Ambush, something like Fortune and Glory over in the more Euro adventure game world. I know, Michael, you had done some coverage of Fortune and Glory before, or things like what was the B-29? Was it the B-29 with Michael? What was the Queen of the Skies game that you guys were doing some coverage of that you were writing the AAR about?
That was probably B-29 Super Fortress. Yeah. From,
yeah. So some of those narrative, America Bomber is another one, like the Gregory Smith aircraft games, basically.
Right. Yep.
That have
those narrative-driven style
narrative element to it. That's almost sort of, I don't want to say calling it a choose your own adventure game seems very reductive, but to an extent, it can feel that way sometimes. And so
I look at more like an RPG.
As you poke around some of these solo games, how often have you seen things stick to those two sort of paradigm ideas? What else have you seen besides just those two, and kind of some thoughts on where those two land in your preferences?
Yeah, I can. I'll go first if you don't mind. So let me just kind of look back, looking at my top 6 solitaire war games of last year, or of 2021. So I haven't done my 2022 video yet. But for 2021, so just run down just 6 games. Only one of them I would describe as is States of Siege, and it is States of Siege system. The rest are their own systems. So first off, Zero Leader from DVG. You mentioned Chuck Siegert. Excellent game, probably the best rule book we've gotten from DVG in a while, so really appreciated that. And then Chuck Siegert added a lot of little flavor bits to it that I really appreciated. Really made me feel like that's what you were playing. Second, Save South Vietnam from Fortress Games. That is probably my new favorite Vietnam game. Certainly my favorite solitaire Vietnam game. Space Infantry Federation from Lock and Load. That is one that's the States of Siege style. From, I believe, Chris Hansen did that one. I think that's who did that one. Fourth, Drive on Suez, which is a Joseph Miranda World at War. It's a magazine game. Fantastic job. Really shows off the logistics of North African campaign. Scream, Aim, Fire from Tiny Battle, which is a tactical squad level game with an AI system. And finally, Tarawa 1943 from Worthington. Out of those, none of those are narrative, and only one is States of Siege. So I guess, and I'll be honest, it's one of those topics that I've heard said a lot from maybe people that don't focus on solitaire war games. They say, well, every war game is either States of Siege or maybe it's this narrative-driven crap, right? Well, first off, I think both of those can create excellent games. Just depends on the design, right? The designer. When I mentioned my top 3 war games for new war gamers, Stilicho, Last of the Romans. Well, that is straight up States of Siege style, but it is a fantastic design by Robert Dulesky. You have a lot of choices. It is that core system. You have so many good choices. That said, as I just listed off, there's many other solitaire war games, and maybe 10 years ago that wasn't the case. Maybe 5 years ago even, but it's starting to change, and it's been changing for the last few years if it wasn't before then. So in my opinion, and I am biased, 100% biased, because I focus on solitaire war games. That's what I play. That's what I cover. That's my passion, right? I feel there are so many great games out there. And those are just 6 I mentioned. There's a dozen, 2 dozen that I probably either I played, but that someone else may love more, or I didn't even get to play. So I feel like there is just a library. There is just a Library of Alexandria, right? Of just these games out there, solitaire games that can't be broken down to just saying, oh, it's a States of Siege game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it's
Mike.
no, I was gonna say, I agree with what Wayne's saying. You know, to say that they're either States of Siege or narrative is just complete injustice, right? I mean, it's like kind of saying, well, it's just an operational game. Okay, well, there's there's different takes on operational games. I mean, there are some fantastic States of Siege games out there, and I don't think I own Stilicho. I'm looking at my game shelf. Well, Wars of Marcus Aurelius, which is a fantastic game. I think it's the same designer, right?
Yep. Yeah, so it's still awesome. Kind of the refined version of it, I would say. It looks better, it plays better. It's one of my favorites.
And see, I didn't think Wars of Marcus Aurelius needed refining. It's that good. So I'll probably have to buy Stilicho now.
Just to clarify, as I'm describing, I'm using States of Siege as one archetype of many of those sort of tower defense kinds of games. The example that I would throw out there is the White Tribe from White Dog Games, when you're ostensibly the leader of Rhodesia trying to get through the insurgency that eventually turned Rhodesia into Zimbabwe. That it's a tower defense game. You're sort of trying to keep the wolves at bay on multiple fronts in ruling and trying to shepherd Rhodesia through this, not just a military conflict, but a very heavy political element. Right. It's not a States of Siege game. It doesn't follow the States of Siege mechanic of the varying tracks along which people are coming after you and whatever, but it's still very much a tower defense game, right? You're kind of holding the middle, and there's a bit of a programmatic process through which the attackers are determined. It's randomized heavily, but they're coming at you from a variety of directions, and that's what the AI is driving. And I think a bit of a South Vietnam, right? and Save Afghanistan and Save South Vietnam. Those are the 2 from Fortress Games, right?
Yeah, correct.
I know they got the Air Force ones also, but I think both of those 2 are very similar tower defense games, even though they're not necessarily a States of Siege specific mechanic. So let's not get married too much to States of Siege as the only kind of thing like that.
Right.
No, but I think people do view it that way. People that, and this is another topic we need to discuss at some point, is, some war gamers, the way they view people who say I'm a solo gamer, it's like, well, you have leprosy, stay over there. I think a lot of people look at solo games and think just what you said, though, Brent, that, it's a States of Siege game. They're all like that. There's no difference in those games. I'm not going to play them. But we had Amabel on one time, and she said something that to me is the deciding factor on these things. And it's, does the player have agency? And there's these States of Siege game, it may be a tower defense even. If the player has to make agonizing choices over what to do when it's his turn to do it, you've achieved your goal, in my opinion, in a good solitaire game. And if it's a States of Siege game, or if it's a tower defense type game, are you having to make tough decisions? Are you having to actually, think about what you're going to have to do? And then are you surprised when things go wrong or when they go right?
Yeah, Mike, I think, and I don't want to, I'm not trying to go to war against, the 2-player wargaming crowd out there. But it would be like, in my opinion, looking at a hex encounter, it's operational level game, and saying, well, aren't they all kind of the same? You got some numbers on the counters. Sometimes they change, hexes, movement values, you move around. Oh, maybe you count for logistics. You're just changing the terrain. You're just changing the numbers on the counters. Well, that's dismissing it too far, right? That's boiling it down too far. It doesn't give credit to some of the amazing designs that are simulating and allowing you to play, and relive these conflicts, these campaigns over history, and learn history, right? And have history come to life on your table. If I can be a little dramatic. Well, that's kind of how I feel about a lot of solitaire games, the good ones. And, they're not all good. But to point out a bad one, or one that's derivative, or to just say, as you said, Mike, well, it's a States of Siege game. Okay. That doesn't tell me whether it's good or bad. I need more information, before I can give that verdict on it.
Yeah, that's why Ben Madison is one of my favorite solitaire only game designers. It's when you play, you pick any one of his games off the shelf. My favorite is still Don't Tread on Me. If I play that, I'm going to have a great time. I still play that game. It's that good. But, I can go pull off, what's his latest one that I've got? Kaiser Krieg, I think it is.
Yeah, Kaiser Krieg. That you
it's another what you'd call States of Siege game, but it plays so differently than Don't Tread on Me, and it's just a different game. And like you said, the big thing with Ben, I think, is the history that's there. So you have this nice historical package. So I'm a history. I love history.
The theme is wonderful, and I've seen
exactly
it so many times. I talk about my games. I talk about the games I love, and in reviews, is a theme come through? Do you feel the history? And like, again, it sounds corny, and a lot of us have very analytical minds. But when you really get down to it, why are we doing this? We have an interest in history. We have a passion for it. And that's part of it, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And it may be quote unquote bad history. It may be good history, but it's the fact it's something that, our civilization, people as humans have gone through, these challenges we've faced, challenges we've overcome, or times where we've lost. And, looking at specifically, Ben Madison. I love Jeff Davis, his game, Jeff Davis. You're playing as a Confederacy, but you're constrained, and you're going to make some bad choices. And you're the bad guys, and at the end, you're going to lose. The noose is tightening. You're going to lose. But he just brings the history and the theme through so heavily in a States of Siege game at its core. But there's so much more to it. That saying that, I always say what it is, but I move beyond that real quick, because this isn't just flip a card and roll a die. This is beyond that. That you have player agency, you have choices, and that's where a good solitaire game, right, is you have choices, you have luck mitigation. There's going to be chaos, there's going to be luck. I mean, give me some dice to roll. That's what I want to do, baby. I want to roll some dice. But give me some luck mitigation in there too, right? Give me a chance to strategize. Give me a chance to think ahead and plan. I don't want to just flip a card and roll a die.
Sounds like, Michael, your proposed B-52 leader is going to dig people into the history, but from a slightly different angle. It's the history of the airframe rather than the history of the people on board or the history of a specific conflict. Is that a fair statement?
Yep, that's what I'm hoping for. That's exactly what I'm hoping for.
So
I think
are you going to be able to put like cool nose art? Are you going to have a variety? Are you going to turn these into like collectible cards as an expansion to the game where you can, horse trade cool nose art with your friends?
Now, Brant, if you give me ideas like that, I'm going to have to give you a credit. That sounds like a good idea, though. I've been trying to. What's that?
We can build the cards, and you know what I mean. You build the cards how they look. Right. There you go. Bam, you got it.
Yeah, I'm gonna get blamed for making collectible cards the expansion.
Introduce those terrible mechanics and ideas into wargaming. How dare you? You're gonna have the old grognards up in arms.
Not for the first time.
Yeah, no.
And I want to say, you guys talking about the whole, actually, I see this as pigeonholing, and it's something I've talked about on the Solosaurus podcast. I cannot stand pigeonholing of a game. Now, it's pretty true. Sometimes you see an obvious game like Ottoman Sunset is obviously a State of Siege system because it says it on the box. I think VPG, I think, was the first company to do that. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm thinking. It was my first perspective of that. So. Yeah, but I don't like it hearing, Ameritrash or Eurogame or that kind of a thing, because it drives me nuts, because it's like when you're trying to describe a game to somebody else and why you like it so much or why you don't like it, it's you can't say this one word because it's like a magnet for opinion. You could say, oh, it's an Ameritrash type of game. Oh, okay, I don't like those. Or what the heck is that? I don't even know what that is. With wargaming, it's a little more cut and dry, where you've got hex movement or area control or things like that.
Just don't use the words model or simulation, or you will be accused of scientificating your hobby.
Well, that's true too. Yeah. I mean, you're not going to I don't know. It's kind of funny. I would think, just from the things I've heard from I will say Eurogaming, even though I do not like using that word, but when I say, difference between wargaming and just normal games, like not normal games. Sorry.
I was going to just, Michael.
We're not being judgy at all.
I was not going to say, you tell some people you're a war gamer and they're like, you're one of those, but there you go.
Exactly.
I play normal games too, everybody. I play normal games too, I swear.
And then you're going down a whole slippery slope too. What the heck is a war game? And you can ask a room full of 100 war gamers what a war game is, and you get maybe 50 different answers easily. I mean, you're going to have invariably the guys that say, oh, it's this. Oh, no, it's this. Oh, it's this. I don't know what the answer is to that. And it's really a matter of opinion. And I think one of the great things about this hobby is you can actually sit around and have these discussions without having to draw a line in the sand, so to speak, and say it's this or it's this. And, it's totally up to you what you see and what you perceive. And to give you an example too, like, for example, B-17 Queen of the Skies, fantastic game that I absolutely adored back in the 80s. And you're along for the ride. It's a narrative. You roll on tables. So that's all you do. You don't really make any meaningful decisions except for the names of your crew. And that's kind of cool in and of itself. But I had this point in gaming where I'm like, I don't like this kind of thing. So I was playing B-29 Stratafortress, B-29, that solo game from Legion, and I realized this is not Rails. What's that?
I would say Steve Dixon.
Yes, Steve Dixon.
Multiple narrative-driven games.
Yep, he did.
I've been playing Skyhawk recently from Legion, just released.
Yep. Anyway. And I have Skyhawk also. So yeah, and Picket Duty as well. He's a great designer. But there was a point where I was like, I can't stand this. There's no meaningful decisions to make. But as we've discussed here, meaningful decisions don't necessarily have to make a good game. It's up to you to see how you like that. And once I have this perception that it's actually not bad being on Rails, it's a narrative generator. And that's sort of like reading a good book. You kind of you don't know what's going to happen on the next page. You flip the page, what happens? Oh, this is what happens. You roll the dice, go to whatever table you need to go to, and determine what happens next. A lot of people don't like that, but I think if you changed your perspective and maybe took a step back, and I'm not meaning you guys, I mean, just in general as a gamer, you can get a heck of a lot more fun out of these kind of things, especially if you're like, it's narrative driven. I'm done. I don't want it. I don't care. I'm not going to watch. I'm not going to play it. I'm not going to buy it. I'm not even going to look at it. Well, think of it that way. Think of it like you're reading a really good book and you want to kind of, as you said, Brant, choose your own adventure. You don't really make decisions, but you're still just along for the ride. And sometimes that's good enough.
The player agency thing is one of those, Mike mentioned earlier that when we had Amabel on a previous show, that player agency is a big deal. And in some cases you want that because you want to be heavily involved in weighing those decisions down. In other times you want to be taken for a ride and make minimal decisions to it. The challenge is if you're looking for agency and you're along for the narrative ride, you just sort of feel like a dice chucker for the AI, right? You're not making meaningful decisions. You're just helping the AI make its decision. And the flip side of it is if you're looking for more of a narrative driven something and you end up in one of those games like a tower defense kind of thing, most of the Ben Madison games, something like Stilicho with where there are a lot of decisions to make, that might drive you nuts because you just want to be entertained. You don't want to have to be, expending that much brain sweat. And so I think part of it, Wayne, you mentioned like you explain the reasons why you don't like a particular game along the way. And it's good that you do that you dig into the details of, I didn't like it, but here are the specific reasons why. I'm always of the mindset that pretty much any game out there has a fan, right? There's somebody out there that's going to like just about any game for whatever various reasons there are.
Yep.
Even a poorly developed one, somebody's going to like that because they get to feel like they're fixing all the issues, right? They're the same people that buy houses that aren't in great shape because they want to fix them themselves. And that's fine. When you're describing the games, talk about this is for, I didn't like this game for this reason, but if you like these other things, this might be the game for you. And that's cool. It's just a matter of making sure that you kind of look, I'm a project manager in my day job, right? The phrase we always use, expectation management, make sure that what people are expecting when they crack the game open is what they're actually going to get. So Wayne, run with that for a minute.
Yeah, so tying back to reviews, right? A good review, and not all of mine are good, but I mean some are. But a good review, you're not saying, "Hey, I don't like this game." Period. Right? End of sentence. You say, "I don't like this aspect, and here's why." And I try to do that with all my reviews and everything I cover. And I know I don't always do it, and that's why I say my reviews are far from perfect. I've looked back and thought, or I've had people comment and ask a question. I say, yeah, I didn't really explain. Or someone said, well, what would you do different here? And I often would try to explain what I would do different. But at the same time, you reach a certain point where your reviews are so long, it's cumbersome, and people aren't going to make it all the way through. And that's not ideal either, because you want to get across what a game is about. And a game that I say I did not enjoy does not mean it is not for everyone, or it's not for you or you, right? It wasn't for me, and here's why. And I think that also ties into when we talk about, being honest with, is a game have a good solo mode? Is it really a solitaire game? Is it, or the complexity, or what, all those things that, we don't have any sort of organized manner of describing these things with games. Labeling them, going back to labeling a game. Is it this type of game? Is it that type of game? We love labels as humans, not wargamers, as humans, right? We love labels because that's easy. It's quick. In the world of TikToks, you want to label something, and we've been doing it for much longer than TikToks, but it's so much easier to get a point across by saying what the name of something or describing it in a sentence or two. But in all honesty, that does not give a true, honest accounting of something, whether it's a game that I didn't like, a game that I loved. I mean, me saying, I love this game, it was so much fun. Well, okay, what made it fun? And I want to touch back on something that, Michael, you mentioned. It was choices. So player agency, right? Having choices. I think that we can get lost, and again, it gets into is the more you want to talk about it, the more you can kind of dig deeper, right? You find more details to look at. Impactful choices. So to say that, and this is not judging either way, by the way. I'm just commenting my thoughts on it. So you have a narrative game where maybe you have few choices. I would say nowadays, the ones by Greg Smith, you have choices, not a ton. You're definitely, like you said, you're kind of creating a story, a little bit on the rails. Maybe you can take a left or a right? You can go on one rail or another. Now you have a hex and counter game. I'm playing, and I play Great Battles of History, and I've had hundreds of units, right? I have 100 choices to make each turn, right? Yes, technically, what am I going to do with each one of my units? But what choices are impactful? What is the actual branching out of those choices? Is it just my choices really go forward? My choices maybe block this road or this path. I mean, what are my honest, impactful choices that are going to have a long-term effect on my gameplay, my experience of it, whether I win or not? So I think that being able to make choices is good for the most part, but at the same time, what are those choices, and are we able to still have fun while also maybe learning something, experiencing history, or in all the many quote-unquote war games, right, that don't cover historical, that look to the future. I talked about Space Infantry Federations, right? It is something that you're creating this whole story of your own, right? A science fiction story. Doesn't mean it's not real, but it's up to you to kind of create that. So anyone else want to jump in?
Mike, that's your cue. Uh-oh.
Bueller. I killed it.
Mike's not Mike.
No, I'm back. I'm here. I'm sorry.
My bad. I started going off at the end there. My apologies.
No. I've got something else going in the background here. So all right, where were we? I'm sorry. Ask again, Brant.
I'm letting Wayne ask again.
So talking about choices in games and whether they are impactful choices. If you have, you can choose a counter. You have 100 counters and you're going to give orders to all of them. But do you really have, is it true sandbox? You can do anything? Or in all honesty, is it going to be, okay, well, most of these guys are going to move forward. A couple are going to move to the flank. A couple of them are going to block this road. And then I'm going to make sure my supply line's open. And okay, my turn's over.
So you mean, are you talking comparing multiplayer to solitaire games?
Just comparing, discussion of choices with narrative-driven games, let's say, where even the new ones with Greg Smith, you have choices maybe more than B-17 Queen of the Skies did, but you still have, right, a few choices. You're on rails, but you can maybe change rails, left or right, versus, I have 100 choices and then it's hex and counter game, but do you really? And how impactful are each of those choices?
Right. Yeah. I'm at a disadvantage here because I'm trying to look at my shelves at what narrative type games I might actually own, because I don't even recall playing any narrative game. I've got, I think the closest thing I have is Enemy Coast Ahead, Doolittle Raid, and I've heard that described as a narrative game. So
that is, but it actually has. I would say the full campaign game has a lot more strategic choices to it.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and so if you're going to do a narrative type game, then there you go. I think that's how you have to kind of make up for just not rolling dice and turning a table over and checking something else out. If you have a campaign and you have, what do you call it? An investment in the game you're playing, you have a crew or you have a set of a couple of bombers that you're taking through campaigns, I think then you've got a lot more reason to play that narrative game than not, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I did that with B-17 Queen of the Skies when I was playing it in the 80s. I put my friends into the bomber, and there was some buy-in for me there and cared about what would happen to them.
I think when you're playing and you can feel the theme and you get excited and you can feel the history and maybe you can put an aspect of yourself into it, that's something that's not tangible, right? You can't quantify that. You can't put that on the box. And it's maybe hard to describe to people, but I think that's why games like B-17 Queen of the Skies, for example, is it is part of the wargaming culture, right? Wargaming, it is. I've never played it. It's an older game. I don't often play older games. I've never played that one. I played many narrative style games that are similar to that, right? Whether it's Greg Smith's The Hunters, Intercept Race from him, or we talk about Steve Dixon's, Picket Duty, et cetera, et cetera. I played many of those types of games, but I think that you can't quantify that, but it's still valid and it's still a huge part of wargaming. And I think that, and what I also like to look at it is, and this is maybe getting a little up in the clouds, but when you have something that drives interest in the hobby, we should embrace it, right? Let's not be negative. The negativity maybe could focus on, hey, how could this be better, right? The criticism, well, I think this could be better this way. But instead of saying, oh, those aren't even war games, or those are whatever, what is that? It's a choose your own adventure book. That's a disservice. Someone put a lot of time into it, and I bet there's people that enjoy it, and that probably, or at least is a good chance to lead that person into other aspects of wargaming, and it's only going to help our hobby in the long term.
Yeah, and see, I don't get that, and there are people I know that don't understand people who like to play solo war games, and there are people in the wargaming community, and I won't mention names, that just don't get why somebody would want to sit down and play a game solitaire. And I think they don't understand. I mean, this is a whole other show, right? But I think they don't. Yeah, that's a whole other show. We don't want to go down it.
They don't understand that some people just don't like other people.
No, see, that's the first thing everybody says is, oh, well, you can't find anybody to play with. Well, okay, that might be one reason that someone might choose to play a solitaire game, but that's not the only reason why someone might choose to play a solitaire game.
I don't think the walls are quite, sorry, I don't think the walls are quite as high as they used to be, though. If you look at wargaming history and go back, say, to the 60s and 70s, and guys that were playing war games back then, it was very, very limited. Obviously, there weren't a lot of titles. And just the fact that we can have this conversation today shows you how much it's changed in the last 40 years.
Yeah, and grown, right? I mean,
exactly.
I think it's exponentially.
Yep, exactly.
But it's like Wayne was saying, I don't understand. The wargaming hobby is small enough as it is. Why do we want to subdivide ourselves even further and, cast disparagements on solo wargamers? And then in the solitaire community, like you were saying, there are people that say, well, I don't want to play a narrative game. It's narrative only. Well, maybe give it a try. And if you don't like it, then don't knock it. Somebody else enjoys it, so.
Yeah, there's a difference between it's not for me versus that game sucks.
Yep. And I think, it's easy for people, and we're all human, we're all people. It's easy to fall into that of saying, well, I didn't like that, so it's no good, period. Right. Well, that's, I've tried to train that out of me as, part of my channel for the content creation aspect of it. But as one of the many people who just play war games. Yeah, there's games where I've looked at it and said, man, I didn't like this at all. And some things I haven't even covered on my channel, even though I spent time with it, because I knew I probably didn't have a lot of positive feedback to give. But I tried to avoid, putting that out there and just saying, this is no good for anybody. Don't even look at it. Well, I don't think that really helps anybody. And I'm not saying most people are like this either, by the way, but just in wargaming, I think that there is an aspect of, gatekeeping, right? That we need to combat. We need to prevent people from gatekeeping others into the wargaming hobby in general, or into different aspects of it. I don't care if you say, you know what, I just don't like, any of David Thompson's designs, Landsworth Ridge, and he does some of these like Ameritrash, Euro-y games, and these games he's doing with war games, and they're kind of barely war games. I don't know if I like them. I may or may not have heard some people kind of say that. Well, then that's okay. You don't have to like them, but please, don't look at anyone else who plays them in a negative manner. Don't judge them based on that, because that person who discovers that game may now look at other war games that are more to your liking, right? And suddenly, you also like this too. Well, now I want to talk to you. So yeah, you don't have to like them all, but please be just accepting of other people's tastes in games.
That is a perfect way of putting it, just because two things come to mind immediately. And the first is Ben Madison getting banned from BGG. And I don't know if that's still the case or not, because of some spirited discussion, let's say, around the game, The First Jihad. Some people just couldn't handle that discussion, and therefore this happened. And that's kind of a sad thing that this was in the first place. And then also, of course, the very famous GMT game that was going to cover colonialism in Africa that never occurred, even though there's plenty of games that do that exact subject. And I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing either way. I'm just saying, for me, these games, war games, are a path to history, and I love reading about it. And if it's something that I'm not aware of or not really clear on, this kind of thing sparks that interest for me. So, you know, that might have been a gateway for me to learn more about the game. You know, playing the history gives you a better perspective than maybe just reading a book about it, but it also means I'm going to want to go out there and learn more about it too. So, and I'm all about the learning process in any way, shape, or form.
If we have one
in
thing in common,
GMT game, there was some bad history involved, and that was part of the problem.
Okay,
yeah.
I might be putting that too lightly then, but you get the gist of what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Yeah.
I think so at its core, I think the one thing we all have in common, right, is a love of history.
Yep.
I think that, you know, different opinions on this or that, game systems, designs, mechanisms, that's fine. We can argue, we can talk, we can debate, and that's okay. But we all have a love for history that brings us together for this. And I think that's only should be encouraged. I'm not big on, you know, we can get into the nitty gritty of the, and I don't know all the details on the GMT game. I know about Ben Madison, what happened to him. You know, I had after my Devil Boats review, I was banned from the Solitaire Facebook group for like 12 hours. So
that'll teach you.
Yeah, I learned my lesson. You know, I just don't think we need to silence people for just because we disagree with them.
Can we all just take a moment and laugh at the absurdity of a solo wargamers group?
we all roll dice alone or together alone or something. I think there was some tagline I saw like that for some solo group. I don't think it was a war game. It was like solo board gaming. I thought it was pretty funny. But
can I tell you how much funniness I've heard over just the Solosaurus concept, and Martin and I talking about solo games, and people are like, why? But it's solo gaming. These are people who don't really know a lot about solo gaming. And so when I talk to them about the podcast, they're like, there's two of you talking about playing by yourself. That makes no sense. But, you know, it is they warm up to it.
But, you know, there are big people, not big people. There are people that are big into multiplayer, though, and they'll say crazy things, too, like we should do away with conventions. So, you know, there's craziness on both sides.
That is true. There's plenty of craziness to go around.
All right.
Well, one of these days we're going to, you know, do the opposite side of the mirror for the solo wargaming podcast and do the, you know, like more than 2-player gaming, you know, podcast, and make sure we cover that as well. But
well, that's why that was a reference to my friend Jim. He really should have been on this podcast tonight.
Why? So he can be mad.
That would have been fun to have him on.
No.
Yeah, 90 minutes of Jim being mad at you guys. That's a good move.
No, we would explain to him. We would explain to him why he shouldn't be mad at us, and then we would all sing a song at the end.
And you really think you'd change his mind?
No. To an extent, yes. Jim is one of those that just doesn't understand. He thinks we all play by ourselves in our basements, and we can't find people to play with. You know, and that's one take on Jim.
I don't want to call Jim out because I don't have the pleasure of actually meeting him, getting to talk to him. But I remember Brant, I think it was you, him, and Gary, right, who did Ardwolf, who did a show that I did a rebuttal video to. And I remember one of the things that he said was what was he saying? Oh, there was what's the game? I wish I could remember. But it was a game that is literally, it won awards as a war game. It has it's 2-player and has solitaire components.
Was it U-Boat when we were picking on U-Boat?
No, this was a newer design from.
This was when we did the Compass holiday catalog, and you did a rebuttal to that. I think is what it was.
One he was nominated. The game was nominated for a Charlie a year ago. 2 years.
It was the map, right?
It was the Barbary War. I can't.
Shores of Tripoli.
Yes. First of all, my apologies. Shores of Tripoli. I've covered that on my channel.
Look, I'm on record as having said many times I am a fan of Shores of Tripoli. I think it's a great game.
He said it's not a war game. I just remember that distinctly, and I said, "What the?" And you know, again, I'm trying to pick on him. I'm sure he didn't really mean it.
Nothing negative against Jim. Jim is.
It made me laugh because I'm like, I got to do a rebuttal video to this whole thing, and then that started. I think that Brant that got me and you talking, and you know, you quickly got me on your
somewhere
show here.
Yeah, we're still trying to get you to show up and join us at one of the conventions too. So.
One of these days.
One of these days.
So I've had, it's one of those things where, in jokes about solitaire wargame aside, I would love to go to a convention. Just life, everything with my son, in his journey and all that. And it's just been tough to say, hey, honey, I want to go to this, wargaming convention in Texas or Connecticut or wherever you guys have them. So one day, though.
It's taken us 15 years to try and get Michael back to one.
That's true. Yeah. That's same boat for me. Hey, honey, I'm going to go to a gaming convention for a week. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Well, let me think a minute, because I always get, you should go to this gaming convention. Aren't you going to go? Really? You should get out of here and go to that convention.
You're not going to buy any games, right? Oh, of course not. No.
Oh, no.
I'm just going to look at them.
Right. And ogle and drool.
I'm going to trade a bunch of them with other people,
Yeah.
which has been known to happen.
Right.
It has.
It's been known to happen. I'm going to win a bunch of them in the raffle because I'm very lucky that way.
I think I lose points with my wife over review copies showing up. And I'm like, honey, I didn't pay for this. They just sent this to me. She's like, oh, okay. Right. And I can just see it in her eyes that there's, I lost a little bit there.
and see, I don't get review copies, but I say that when things show up at the house. And
no, you say it anyway.
It's just the same, right? Oh, this is a review copy.
As long as she doesn't look at the invoices.
Yep.
Right. I mean, I'm going to review it, but
review copy paid for by me.
Yeah, exactly.
It's for review purposes, so it's not wrong to say review copy.
So let me ask a question going back to some of the solo designed games. In terms of the descriptors that you guys see in the packaging of some of the solo games, think back to some of the ones that good or bad, but can you remember or think of any particular solo designed games where the marketing copy didn't particularly match the experience that you ended up with playing the game? Not because, and so Wayne, like, take Devil Boats out of this, right? Not because it right. needed a developer, but because the stated type of gameplay or the expectation you had going into it of these are the kinds of things I expect to be doing in the game are not the things that I actually ended up doing in the game. And so, Mike, start with you. Is there, I know you've done a bunch of like multi-handed, solo play of games, but some of your purpose designed solo games out there, have there been times where it sort of sold itself as one thing, but you ended up experiencing something very different?
One that stands out, and I actually like the game. It's not a bad game. For me, was Midway Solitaire. And it wasn't what I was expecting, let me say, was something that simulated more the cat and mouse game in the Pacific where I'm trying to find Japanese carriers before they find me. But what I got was more of a States of Siege type game where I had these tracks of Japanese fleets coming in towards me and I'm trying to fend them off. So that one kind of took me by surprise. It was a good game, like I said, a fun game, and I enjoyed it. But it was not what I expected.
Yeah. Wayne, what about you? What's again, leaving aside underdeveloped some things, right?
Of course. So just to kind of touch on, this isn't my choice, but touch on what Mike said, Midway Solitaire. I enjoyed that game quite a bit. The number one thing that I heard from people, and it's obvious, but it just kind of, I don't know why it makes me laugh, was people saying, well, it doesn't just cover the Battle of Midway. Like, yeah, you're right.
That's true too.
It may say Midway Solitaire. It's not. It's basically the latter half of 41 through the middle of 42 in the Pacific. Like that's what it is, but that doesn't have quite the same ring to it as Midway Solitaire, and probably would sell a few less copies. So I get that.
That's true. You may or may not have a battle at Midway in that game.
No kidding. But I did enjoy that one. But so thinking of games that maybe not quite as described, but actually, and I think of two, and I did like both of them. First one I want to say from GMT, Flashpoint South China Sea from Harold Buchanan. From the description, from what I read, and again, I did actually like the game. In fact, I love the system, but at its heart, it's just a cube pusher, right? It's play a card. You can play it for the points, buy cubes, or play it for the event. Card-driven game, right? Very simple. But for some reason, and maybe this is not me, when I was looking at it and kind of looking at the design, looking at some of the coverage of it, I thought, man, this thing is dripping with theme. which in reality, the theme could be anything. You could be farming and like you're putting out wheat, you're putting out soybeans, like, oh, there's weeds coming in, like literally it could be any theme pasted on it. The map could look like anything, but the design, the engine, the system is so good. I just kept overlooking it. I'm like, I don't care that this could be anything. I'm having so much fun, like cat and mouse, even with the bot, right? And in the game you can play either as America or as China, which of course I always played as America. And it's just fantastic game overall, but the theme is like, what it could be anything. And then the second game I want to mention is from Lock and Load Publishing, Point Blank, V is for Victory. So I did not play, I want to say, what's the old Upfront? It's kind of based on Upfront, right? Inspired by Upfront. I never played that, but when I saw this, it's this card-based game. I felt like it was going to be a card-based tactical World War II game. I thought it was going to be like Warfighter. It's nothing like Warfighter. And when it comes to the terrain, so it comes with a map, like a big map, foldable map board you put out. Those have nothing to do with the game. It's actually just basically they said like, we maybe should put this with it so people understand we're talking about with terrain. The terrain is based on cards, on terrain cards, and you're moving around through the terrain cards. At the same time, the line of sight is handled a little awkwardly for me, but I enjoyed it. It's also a lot heavier than it seemed like it would be. It seemed like this is going to be so much easier to learn than say Lock and Load Tactical, right? It's gonna be a game that it's a card game, card-based tactical game. This is what I want. These are the types of games I love. Full solitaire. Oh no, this is a brain burner a little bit, at least for me. And again, an enjoyable game, but it's one of those things where I feel like going in, and that's where I'm always very clear. I'll tell you I'll do a review and I'll say, oh, I love this game, and I love the game for this. It says, but beware, it may seem like it's X, but really it's Y.
See, I think wargamers of a certain vintage saw that and thought of DVG's Warfighter series. Wargamers of a slightly more mature vintage saw Point Blank V is for Victory and immediately thought of Upfront.
Yep.
And I think that's a big difference there. There's just a generation gap there of what folks looked at. And I think Point Blank V is for Victory is much closer to Upfront than it is to
absolutely nothing like Warfighter. Just in case anyone's listening to this thing, I should check. It's nothing like Warfighter. It's a good game in its own. But
this is the part where I'll point out that DVG's Warfighter is nothing like the original Warfighter game that was out 10 years before Dan's. So, which is not a solo game, a completely different thing.
Oh, then no interest here.
Michael, what about you? So something that you grabbed along the way that sort of sold itself as one thing, but in reality turned into something a little different, whether you liked it or not, a solo game that didn't go the way the marketing copy sort of explained it to you.
There's a couple that come to mind, but before I get into that, I can talk a little bit about the fact that in the early 80s, and your guys' perception of this might not be the same, but for me in the early 80s, when Victory Games started doing this, adding a scale on the back of the box that said, this is the complexity of the game on a scale of, I think it was 4 boxes, and solitaire suitability. And that really made things much better for me as a solo gamer. And I know that everybody pretty much does that these days. I mean, there's even some that do it on a scale of 1 to 10 on the back of the box. I'm seeing that in my mind, but I can't remember the publisher that does that. But GMT does it, everybody does it now. And starting back then though, it was like, oh, cool. It's got all 4 boxes ticked, man. This is a solo game. Cool. I think specifically about Ambush, all of the Ambush modules, which is a game by Victory Games from back in the day, which is insanely expensive now if you can find it. But it's a really good game in my mind. It's kind of on rails, but not really. It's paragraph driven, and it's my understanding that the developers had such a hard time with it, and it was a nightmare, and they didn't really like doing it as they were developing the game because it was such a pain to keep everything straight. But that series was awesome. And then Battle Hymn, which is the same system but in the Pacific. So Ambush was in Europe and Battle Hymn in the Pacific. You guys know this, but listeners might not. And then I was just riding this wave of these games. I just love these games. They're solo only, man. I mean, there was a few others that did that, but not everything. It was mostly 2-player stuff, where you had to go head to head and play it multi-handed, or, something like Third Reich or World in Flames. I had to play all the sides myself, and this was like the bot's handling it, everything's handling it. This is great. And then I ran into Open Fire, which was a solo game for tank combat in Europe by Victory Games, same people that made Ambush and Battle Hymn. I was really excited about that, and it wasn't anything like either one of those games. It was so crushingly disappointing. I will never forget that feeling. I despise that game. It was so terrible. But you look at the back of the box, it says it's solo, and it was, and it just seemed like a fantastic choice. Going from squad combat to tank combat. But back, nowadays that's not a problem. You can find plenty of that, but back then not so much. So that really destroyed me on the whole series. Another one, I don't know if it's necessarily falling in this category, but one that I've adored for years is Mosby's Raiders, another Victory Games title, go to figure. But it's I wasn't sure what to expect when I bought that game. Usually back then you see solo off the scale chart. It's a solo game. I bought it immediately and I would play the heck out of it. And I didn't know really what to expect with that. I didn't know anything about the history. The Civil War, of course, but I didn't know anything about Mosby or his Raiders or the work they did behind Union lines. It gave me such a broad perspective of this side of the Civil War that nobody really talks about. They talk about the big battles, Bull Run, Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, of course. Everything is I think every single battle in the Civil War has been simulated to death. But this kind of thing, doing the guerrilla warfare kind of a thing, it never really got touched on at that time. And that game just always has sat with me as being pretty awesome. I've got it on Tabletop Simulator. And the funny thing is, even to this day, I can just crack it out and start playing it without really having to get into the rules too deeply. Because I know it so well. That's sort of like, I call it my Axis and Allies phase, because I went through a phase where I could set up that game blind after playing it for years and years. But I'd have to go with Mosby's Raiders for sure on that.
All right. Now, wait, you mentioned, I'm required to do this because you mentioned the complexity ratings and the solitaire suitability ratings on the back of these game boxes. Mm-hmm. And I'm convinced that there is a dartboard manufacturer out there that sells dartboards with all of those rankings on them. And these publishers take a dart and throw it and assign the rating based on where that dart lands.
Maybe with complexity.
That's how useful those ratings are in most cases.
That's a good point.
I had the same thought.
What was that, Wayne?
I would say I had the same thought as Mike.
I think that with complexity, because it really depends on you as a gamer. Some people might think game A is way too complicated, but you play it and you think there's nothing to that. Game B is really complicated. Oh no, it's not. B is really easy. It just depends on your perspective. But the solo aspect of it, something like Ambush, solo game, I don't think there's okay.
Oh no, if it's a solitaire game, no, but there are games that are multiplayer games that will actually have a solitaire rating on the back, and the solitaire ratings sometimes are exaggerated greatly.
That's a good point. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And usually I'm very hesitant about any such games, and I talked to Martin about this on the podcast before. It's just makes me very standoffish when it's tacked on or when it's a expansion.
I can give you an exact example of that. It's the same designer, the same system, but two different publishers, and one rates his designs as high solitaire and one is low. And I enjoy the games, by the way. Let me preface it, so don't get mad at me, Michael. Michael Ranella, and with his Area Impulse games. So when you look at them with Revolution Games, the ones published by Revolution Games, so say Operation Battle Axe or Patton, he has many, and the ones I've played, I've enjoyed. I believe they're rated high solitaire. However, his exact same system, very similar to each other anyway. For Against the Odds magazine rates him as low solitaire, and it's the same. It's Area Impulse, maybe the Sunset die roll mechanic. There's not, we're not talking about a difference. Well, these have hidden units. No, nothing like that. There's not hidden units in there, but the publisher, in this case, the two different publishers, will determine in that case. So I'm sure sometimes it's up to the designer. Like I kind of mentioned before, you're talking about a game like Absolute War, right, where clearly Carl Paratus, and he is an accomplished designer with many fantastic designs. No Retreat, absolutely. He, I'm sure, said to GMT, yeah, this is high solitaire. And they're like, okay, even though it's not really high solitaire suitability, right?
Well, yeah. And that's the thing. Like there's no universal grading system even within the company itself.
Absolutely.
The company's asking the designer, hey, where would you rank this on X, Y, or Z?
And I know specifically this because I've seen him, and it was public. So again, Michael, my apologies. I saw him basically post on one of the Against the Odds forums, maybe on Consim World, saying to them, "Oh, hey, I see it's rated low. it actually is, suitable for solitaire play, which I play him solitaire and I don't have a problem with it. And I would not rate his gaming system, that system, I would not rate them as low at all. It doesn't have hidden information. I wouldn't rate them as low. Maybe medium, maybe not high because they don't have a solitaire system itself. You have to play both sides, but at least a medium, I would say. So it definitely, like you said, Brant, I mean, it comes down to the designer. And then what that publisher, are they just going to listen to the designer? Or are they going to input their own? There's no third party. And I'm not saying there should be. This isn't a multi-billion-dollar industry like movies where you send your movie off to a ratings system. They look at it and they say, okay, this is the rating it's going to have. Clearly not. That's ridiculous. But maybe a little more consistency would be nice for everybody and more helpful.
But the other thing that's missing too, Wayne, is when they say solitaire suitability, again, it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of this podcast. What's your definition of solitaire?
Yeah. Is it so
what is that designer or that developer? When they ask him, what do you think this is solitaire wise, its suitability? Yep. What's in his mind? What's he thinking in terms of, is it two-handed? Is it a solitaire game? Is it, oh yeah, you can play all 4 sides yourself and have a great time?
And I think there's a difference between can it be done and should it be done. Look, you can make pickle flavored soda. That doesn't mean you should. So, you can play a coin game solitaire by using the bots for the other 3 players. I wouldn't recommend it. Sort of kills the vibe of how the coin game should be played. But so is that solitaire capable? Sure. Does that really mean that you have a solitaire mode for that game? I'm not sure I would want to make that argument. And Mike, this goes back to your point. The fact that you include a solitaire scenario or 2, it might be solitaire friendly, but is it an actual like solitaire capable, out of the box? I'm going to get my money's worth playing this by myself the same way I would if I had a regular gaming partner or group to play with. And that's a tough sell to make. And I would see you as being rightly justified in complaining that, no, that's not really solitaire friendly or solitaire enabled. I'm hoping that now that GMT has the GMT1 program and sort of somebody honchoing their solitaire gaming efforts there, that they've got some sort of clearinghouse that they're getting involved in. Hey, how solitaire friendly is this really? And let's try and standardize some of those descriptions.
I would really, can we get them on and do a podcast? I would love to know what they're up to. I've heard,
you're allowed to invite people too. It doesn't all have to be me.
I've heard that GMT has this top secret solitaire or whatever it is going on. That's all I've heard though. What are they doing? What is it? Are they writing rules for existing games that you can play solitaire?
Obviously confused me for somebody that works at GMT.
No, but you work at Armchair Dragoons. I'm saying, can't you get them on and we can do a podcast and ask them what the heck they're doing?
Okay, look, I sent out 2 different emails before the season said, hey, who wants to do what topics? And you didn't mention this once.
Well, we didn't talk about it.
Feel free to make the invitation to those guys.
Brant, I've been dodging you for months, if not years at this point, and you finally got me on. So if you can get me on, you can get anyone on.
All I'm saying is it doesn't have to be me chasing people around. Other folks are welcome to invite people to the podcast.
I think GMT...
I'm happy to share the load.
I think GMT read the writing on the wall and looked at it and said, man, solitaire games sell and they're successful and people talk about them and people enjoy them, right? And again, I'm not even trying to be critical when I say they sell, because we look at that sometimes, we say, well, you want to sell something? How bad is it? You're evil. Well, no, I mean, if these companies don't sell games, they won't be in business to make more games, right? To publish more games. So they say, I think so. I think they created this division where, and I don't work for them. I don't know what they're doing in their little bunker while they're working on them, but I think it's pretty clear when you look at some of the designs that then they have. Some are solitaire design, but many are the games they were as designed, right? A 2-player game, maybe a multiplayer, that have a solitaire mode now attached to it, right? Written by someone else. Jason Carr, right, comes in and makes a solitaire mode for the Harold Buchanan that I just talked about. The Flashpoint South China Sea, right? Right. So here Buchanan made this game. It's a card-driven game. Jason Carr came in and made the solitaire mode for it, and it's excellent. Solitaire bots for both sides, a little flow chart, easy to follow. It's not a separate game. It's the game, just you follow the flow chart. But because the game's simple enough, unlike maybe a coin game, right? It's very playable solitaire, super playable. I think that's what GMT is doing, because they understand that Solitaire gaming, and you guys mentioned this earlier, it's growing. It's growing now from where it is. And I'm not going to say it's the future of wargaming. That's not true. What I'm saying though, it is going to become a bigger part of the pie of wargaming.
And I will say kudos to GMT for publishing Stuka Joe's solo method for the card-driven games. That was
Genius.
Awesome to see.
Genius, yeah. And welcome to people, right? I mean, good for them and good for the community and good for gamers. Give people that option, right?
Exactly. And I actually did a playthrough of, I think it was Command and Colors Tricorn using Stuka Joe's method. And it's, I played it two-handed, playing both sides best you can. And then I played using his system, and it's a different game. So, he did an excellent job of designing that system. And yeah, thank you GMT for picking that up and publishing it. And I think they're coming out with another. I think there's an expansion of that coming up pretty soon.
Yep, he's got a second one coming out. I'm not sure when exactly, but it's coming out. I've got the first one myself too, and I agree with you.
And then also, Wayne, going back to what you talked about, I hope that what they're not doing is taking a game that's out there and something that covers like the American War for Independence, and they go pick up a game on that and say, we're going to design a solitaire add-on to that and give me something that's not the full campaign, right? Because this is what we see in the games we were talking about earlier, where here's the Pacific War. Play, the entire 1941, 1945, both sides. And if you want to play solitaire, we've got a special 1942 scenario just for you. It's like, well, wait a minute. I want to play the whole war. So I'm hoping that whatever GMT is up to is nothing like that. I'm hoping it's more along the lines of a Stuka Joe type thing, where you're going to give me a system that I can use and I can apply to an existing war game.
I want the full game and experience. It can be modified, right? A little bit.
To a degree, it can be modified, of course.
I don't want a limited scenario. I'm with you 100%, Mike. I don't want a limited scenario that I open this box and if I buy this game and it's X amount of dollars and it's heavy and I get, my hernia's acting up and I open it up and I set it up and all these, and then, really the solitaire mode is only this small aspect of it. That's a disappointment.
Right. The tutorial mode to learn the game. Here's your solo mode.
Yeah. Okay. No,
there are games, and I won't name, there are games I think that do that, where they'll say, this includes solitaire play. And then the solitaire play is a learning scenario. And you're like, okay, that's not a solitaire.
So I want to throw out one last thing quick here before we call it a night. It's a night as we're recording this, although it could be, the morning walk with the dog, depending on when people are actually listening. This is something that's a lot less prevalent in the wargaming world, but you do definitely see it in the Eurogaming, adventure gaming world. Mike, I know you and your wife played a bunch of Gloomhaven. Over the last 2 or 3 years, whatever. And
we have all 50 pounds of Frosthaven sitting on the floor right now.
Yeah, well, causing the floor to sag right now.
It's on the second floor, so it's sagging into the first floor.
So where do you come down on sort of co-op versus solo play, given that co-op there's a shared partnership in that you're playing on the same side, but you're still sort of playing against kind of the AI, for lack of a better term. You're still playing against the system in the game. Talk to us a little bit about kind of the difference between solo versus co-op in sort of the solo design, because there are very many co-op games that can very easily be played solo, not playing multiple roles, just playing it, one person against the game. Talk to us a little bit about kind of the difference in feel there between solo and co-op, and then we'll grab Wayne and Michael's thoughts on it after that.
Okay, you're going to make me talk about the Charles S. Roberts Awards, so let's get it over with now.
I wasn't trying to.
There is a category.
I didn't mention them at all.
Well, there is a category that's just that: best solitaire or cooperative board game, and I hate that category. I think it needs to be changed. A solitaire war game should be just that, a solitaire war game, one player that plays a dedicated system. Now, you can have a component to that, like we like to do with the multiplayer games that do solitaire. You can have a component to your solitaire game, maybe where you add on some some cooperative play to go along with that. So I think it's two different things. I think you have solitaire games, and then I think you have cooperative games. That's my opinion. Next.
I couldn't agree more, Mike. One word: viewpoint. What is your viewpoint playing this game? in solitaire games, right, you have the one viewpoint. It's you versus the game. It's you versus the system. It's you versus a bot, a flowchart, whatever. Cooperative, there's multiple viewpoints, right? Because it is designed for multiple people. They may be working together, but you still have multiple hands of cards, multiple sets of dice, multiple fronts or controls, units you control, etc. So already, when you're now playing that solitaire, you are breaking it up in your head a little bit. No different than, in my opinion, no different than playing a two-player game, opposing, and just playing it quote-unquote two-handed, right? You are now having to think about two different aspects of it, two different viewpoints. You're no longer just you versus the game. You're multiple yous. And that just is all sorts of crazy to me. So you can do them. It's valid. It's a way to play them. But to me, it's no different than when I play a Great Battles History scenario. I'm instead of playing both sides, I'm playing the multiple viewpoints of my side.
Michael, what do you think?
Well, I had to think about that a little bit, actually.
That's why we let the other two guys talk first. We're helping you out here, man.
Oh, let's see. I'd have to say that in my opinion, a co-op game that has no hidden info is almost as good, if not as good as a solo game. Now, that's not to say it's the same thing. It's not, obviously, because as Wayne just said perfectly well, that, that the whole point of a co-op game is to have different perspectives on something. But when you have a game that's everybody's vying for the same goal, and you win as a team or you lose as a team, I think those are just perfectly fine as solo games. Now you talk about something with a little bit difference, and I want to mention Nemesis, which is a fantastic board game in my opinion, where it's very alien-esque, where you're wake up on a starship and you got these alien critters running around the ship, and you're trying to get things going. You're trying to repair the engines. You're trying to get supplies together. You're trying to set the course back to Earth or wherever it is that you end up going. So you got this team play aspect going on where you're all trying to achieve these same goals. And when you're playing it solo, you certainly know that in your mind is not as segmented, say. So, you don't have, I'm going to do this first and that first, and somebody else might do it a different way. But in this game, there's hidden roles where you might not necessarily have the same goal as everybody else. And I'm not talking about something like Battlestar Galactica where you play as a Cylon and you're just trying to screw everybody up. Sometimes it is like that, though, but sometimes it's just something very minor that you're trying to achieve, like, say, player X doesn't make it onto the shuttle, or, the certain piece of information that's protecting the company is gathered, whereas another player might not want that to happen. Little things like that. You can't play that solo at all, obviously, because we're talking hidden information and it's just not doable. But technically, it's still a cooperative game, and the game gives you the choice, if you want to play it solo, to just ignore all that. And that's sort of like, and now that I'm really thinking about it, that's sort of like just kind of cutting a part of your arm off when you're playing a game like that, because it's like, this is the whole experience, like Battlestar Galactica, for instance. Playing that solo, you don't have that hidden character part of it. You still have the game where you're fighting against the Cylons and trying to get the fleet to survive, especially if you have some of the expansion games. But overall, it's still it's what you put into it. And for me, as I said, I started this gaming career playing multi-handed and not necessarily with a lot of systems that allowed me to play solo. It's just the way it's been for me. You just do your best to do each side. And in a cooperative game, it's kind of the same thing. But to me, it's a lot more fun because you got the same goal. I'm probably babbling now. I don't know. But that's what I think.
Look, they're all interesting perspectives. I just know that's probably on the minds of at least some of the listeners in terms of where do you draw those lines between them, because a lot of things that are co-op designed or co-op friendly, you sort of see solo and co-op kind of go hand in hand these days. And Mike, you mentioned it, in terms of the categories and the awards, and they're not really the same, even though they are similar and may share some mechanics within the game. The intent of the play, I think, is different, and I think that's something that isn't always made appropriately clear by the designers, by the marketing copy, by whatever else. So I was just kind of curious about those thoughts. Hey guys, we're to the point now where we kind of need to wrap it up for the night. And Wayne, thank you for finally being here and letting us kidnap you for an hour and a half to come join us on the podcast. I'm glad the schedule's finally lined up and you were able to join us. So thank you.
Oh, I appreciate that. I had a great time. Thanks, gentlemen. It's I'm excited for Solitaire Wargaming as it is, and I'm excited for the future. I think it's nothing but looking up, and that's why get a chance to talk about it, I love to do it. So future, I'll come on again if we talk about solo wargaming.
So, Michael, thank you for skipping dinner to be here. Appreciate that. And,
no problem. Thanks. I mean, as Wayne said, this is a fantastic hobby, and I actually find it to be less polarizing than I'd say other parts of the gaming industry. Others get into some really spirited discussions, and we do too, but they tend to be talking more at people than with people, like I found in wargaming discussions. So,
well, keep in mind too, we also brought 3 people on the show who are all big fans and proponents of solitaire wargaming, instead of having somebody like Cyrano on here to yell at you guys.
So we can do that. We can do that.
We intentionally kept it sort of congenial here. And Mike, thanks for taking 4 episodes to show up for your co-hosting duties.
Has it been 4?
Yes, it has actually.
And I'll just echo what you said, Brant. Well, thanks to Wayne for showing up. It was an enjoyable experience. I'm glad you were on the podcast.
I appreciate that. Thank you, gentlemen.
And especially a big thanks to the audience. Look, we're going to do this whether you're here or not, but we appreciate the fact that you do spend some time with us, even if you're listening to us on like 1.4x speed so you can get through this quicker. That's the secret to getting through podcasts, man. You listen to them on high speed. So, and so thank you to the audience for joining us. Again, coming up later this season, something that does tie into this one, we're going to have a couple of folks come in and talk about different kinds of AI, both digital and tabletop AI and development over the years. We are going to have at least one episode on different kinds of rules presentations and what folks like and don't, and what works and what doesn't and such. And at some point we're going to have Gary come on here and yell about something because he's Gary and can't help it. And we've actually already had him on once, but he wasn't really yelling that night, so it was a little out of character. So that's what's going to be coming up for this spring. Again, if you've got any suggestions for an episode you'd like to see or a guest you'd like us to try to wrangle, drop a note in the comments down below this episode. We'd love to see the feedback, and we look forward.
That's where I'll put the request for the GMT1 guys. Thank you. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, you do that. And in the meantime, thanks everybody, and we'll catch you next time on another episode of Mentioned in Dispatches.